Look at that. We're talking about blocks today. Let's see. And I think we'll do this one in 2 parts. It's going to be 1 part to go over the general block editor in AutoCAD, going over like all what the different things do, what at least the ones that we use. There's other things in there that we don't use, like other tools and things too. But we'll talk about how to make these things work because there is all kinds of crazy stuff you can do once you know how to make blocks. So let's see. Come on. All right. All right. Oh no. Looks like we lost Jordan. All right. When do you guys want to try to add him back in real quick?
Yeah, sure thing.
All right. Send this over to Brandon real fast here. All right. I'm all set now. Oh, hey, you're back. All right. You guys want to go ahead and clock into 1000 in direct and just say that you're training on blocks today, or at least for right now. That'd be awesome. I just did that a second ago here before jumping into that call with Brandon. We'll go ahead and pull up AutoCAD here. Maybe I'll just go ahead and close some of the stuff that I have open currently, and then we'll jump right in. Okay. So I don't have a specific block in mind to work on with you guys today, but we could probably recreate one that we already have just as practice. And what I'll probably do is let me pull up the blocks file. There we go. Okay, so you've probably all seen this before. This is our blocks file, which is essentially the database that houses all of the blocks that you have in your tool palette. So anything that's in yellow is actually something that has not been created at this point. So we could actually pick one of those blocks and actually work on building one of those too, which would be actually pretty cool, maybe because it would help us as well. So what I'll probably do is we'll start by just making a single block, and let's see, I'll open up a blank AutoCAD file for this. So we're gonna go into the AutoCAD default templates. I'm gonna pull up this ACAD.dwt. I kind of use this all the time for when I'm working on something individually and I don't want to be working on a template. That way, this is just a blank space. It doesn't even have any paper space title blocks or anything like that. It's just a blank AutoCAD file. So what I'll do is I'll save it as, and I'm going to save it to my training materials folder, and I'm going to go block practice. We'll just label it that. Oh, save that there. That way I don't accidentally save over my AutoCAD default template either. I don't want to do that. But let's talk about blocks. So the first thing with blocks that we'll talk about is I'm going to drop in just a square to start with. So let's go like 12 by 12. We'll make it a 1 foot by 1 foot square. All right. So we'll pretend this is our block. We're going to start with that. I'm going to put it on the geometry layer just for like fun, because that's our standard layer for most things that we draw anyway. But let's go ahead and create a block. So to do that, we did touch base on this a little bit during the stair training, but we're going to type in block. As soon as you type that in, you're going to see an abundance of different commands that pertain to blocks, and you can scroll a mile-long list there. But what you really want is you really just want this top one. It's one with the little starburst sun next to it that says block. You open that up. This little menu pops up on your side screen on my end. It should be over here. And just like when we were dealing with the stair treads, we need to give this block a unique name. So why don't we just call this practice block? Just for this purposes, or for the purposes of playing around with this. I always like to pick a base point to where I'm going to have the user be able to move the block. If I wanted to, I'll usually just pick like something like the bottom corner. That'll be my base point there. And then what I'd like to do from there is select the objects in my model space that I want to be inside of that block. So in our purposes here, it's just the square. So we're going to highlight that square, hit enter, and we've essentially established all the boundaries for what we need for our block. Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to think if there's anything else. Oh, the base point is also really important too, because if you pick a base point, let's say you picked a base point that's like over here. Now, I don't know why you would do that, but if you did this and use that as your base point, anytime you go to drag and drop that block in, your cursor is going to be where the base point is. So the block is going to be like a mile over here somewhere. So you always want to make sure that your base point is somewhere that makes sense. And a lot of times for me, what I like to do is put it on the bottom left corner of that block or the shape that I'm using. It doesn't have to be that, but it always makes the most sense to put it somewhere on the object or near the object that you're working with. If you go through these other block definition things here, you can kind of see some of the other things you can do with this. So you can, under behavior here, this area on the right-hand side, if you're working on an object like the things you see under the on-site annotation tab on your tool palettes, so things like the hardware material bubble, the centerline symbol, the align symbol, any of those things, those are annotated blocks. And they're important because when you have something like that, you want to make sure that your text always prints the same size no matter what scale you're using. And so that's where annotative objects become a necessity, because when you set something to be annotative, it's going to scale it to whatever scale you use for your viewport. So I don't have it checked here because I don't have any text or anything that needs to scale as I'm changing my viewport scale. So I'm not going to check that. But if you did want to make a block that has text or anything like that, it might be worth your time to play around with that a little bit more. There's other things on here too, like if you wanted to, if somebody was to scale this block, you can scale things uniformly in AutoCAD. You can also scale things differently. So if you wanted to resize this block, you can lock it so that way, no matter what, the user cannot stretch it left and right, like scale it left and right wider than they do the height, if that makes any sense. It just sets or locks your aspect ratio when you go to scale the object, so you can't scale it at a weird like shape. It has to stay the same shape that it is currently. So you can use that too. It's kind of neat. This one is on by default, is allow exploding. If this was unchecked, I can show you what that would do. Well, yeah, let's just do that. If it's unchecked, what's going to happen, of course, is it's not going to allow you to explode that block. So right now you can see if I open up my properties pane and leave that up here, this is a block reference. And if I go to explode that reference, it's not going to allow me to do that. Like it just says, no, it won't do it. So if you wanted to make a block that does that, you can by switching that in your block definitions before you actually create the block. So I'm going to go back to square one, quite literally, and I'm going to name this practice block again. Okay, we'll do the same thing. Corner for the base point, object, select the block. And when I hit OK, it's going to say, do you want to redefine this block? Because I've already made a block called practice block in this file. And that's fine. If you know that you want to update something, you can hit redefine, and it's going to change whatever that block is to this new item that we have selected. So redefine. And now this is back to being a block again. But, oh, wait, did I forget to uncheck that? Oh, gosh darn it, I did. All right, one sec. Man, I can't believe I did that. All right, here we go. Oh, practice block. Aha. All right, now we're back. So this block is explodable. It's just a square, something that's easy to start with here. So we'll go and double click on that block, which will open this edit block definition. You can also type in bedit, and bedit will do the same thing. So if you type in bedit and then select the block you want to work on, it'll give you a drop-down list of all those blocks that are in your current CAD file. If you're working in a template, there might be a lot more of these than what's shown here, because this only includes a couple of things that I was playing around with in here before. So anyway, I'm going to hit OK. We're going to go into block editor. And let's see, one sec here. Sorry. Oops. Okay. Block editor. All right. By default, the block editor has more of a grayed out color like this as your background. So I just wanted to change mine so it matches more what you're used to seeing there. So if you're in the block editor, it'll usually have this grayed out background. Now you can always change that too. If you wanted to, for any reason, to change your, you minimize that. If you ever wanted to change anything with your AutoCAD, like let's say you wanted to change a color for your background or anything like that, you can go into the AutoCAD logo up top, down to options here. And this menu will pop up, which is a pretty extensive menu, but as long as you know what you're looking for, it's not that terrible. But if you navigate over to display, there are different themes in AutoCAD you could pick by default. You can also click on this colors tab down here, and it'll bring up this little menu, which will allow you to manipulate whatever color you want this to be. I think one time as a joke, I put it to bright green to see what would happen, and believe me, you do not want to do that. So I'm just going to restore this to the normal template here. So when you open the block editor, as long as you have that square, you're going to see the exact same thing I have here. So the base point is essentially going to be your origin. So your X and Y is right there. And you're going to see, as soon as you open the block editor as well, that you have a new toolbar up here called block editor. That's something we haven't really messed with yet. That's all brand new. It's specific to editing blocks, although you are more than welcome to jump over here and switch back and forth to these other ones, but the block editor one is the one you're going to be using the most in here. So also, you should have what's called the block authoring palette, which is essentially like a tool palette, but for the block editor. It has, by default, 4 categories: parameters, actions, parameter sets, and constraints. Without getting too crazy detailed into blocks, the 2 that you're going to use the most are going to be parameters and actions. So parameters, essentially what that is it's what the user is going to use to manipulate your block. So these are going to be like grip points, stretch points, rotation points, different things like that. And these are available to use, but you have to pair these with an action. So essentially, if you want to think about it this way, this is the button that is going to change something here, but it needs an action tied to that button. So kind of goofy, but if you're setting up like a website or something, it's kind of the same way. You set it, you put a button on there, and then you have to set like a link, or you have to set like an action to that button. So it's kind of like that. So we'll jump right in. We'll talk about these a little bit. So these here, you've got point, which is essentially just the same thing as a base point. So really what you're doing is adding a grip point to your block for the user to be able to hover their mouse over and be able to select and move the block with that grip point. Okay. You also have linear and polar. Linear is kind of like, you pretty much always use that with a stretch command. So linear and polar are going to be the same type of thing, I believe. I don't really use polar, but I'm going to pull out my AutoCAD textbook just to make sure I'm not telling you the wrong thing here, because like honestly, I don't use it. So for me, I don't think that, well, it helps to talk about it, but really the relevancy of it really doesn't really matter too much for what we're doing here. So let's see, pull up this book here. Editing standard blocks. Okay. Blocks with attributes, blocks with definitions. Okay. There it is right there. Okay, so page 732. Cody Brown in Illinois also has books pretty much the same as the ones here that I have. I'm sure he's more than willing to lend them to you guys if you want to mess around and dig into these at all. But the book that I have here is just an old textbook from when I was in school. It talks about what these different, like it talks about just AutoCAD in general, but this is the one I'm looking at here. So anyways, what they're saying a polar parameter does is it creates a distance and angle that can be assigned to a move, scale, stretch, or polar stretch, and array actions too. So now I don't use it very often, but it looks like what you would use it for is if you had to stretch something at a funky angle, possibly. That might be something you may need. So maybe down the road we'll find a use for it. You also have other options here though too, like XY parameter, which let me see if what that has in here too, because I don't use this one either. Pretty much the main one that you're going to use is rotation and linear. Alignment and flip are pretty nifty though too, but let's see. X and Y parameters. That's set. Okay, so X and Y is for setting up an array in a block. So that is pretty useful actually. Rotation is a circular grip point, which sounds exactly like what it does. So you set that grip point to the center of where you want this to spin. So let's say I wanted my block to spin around this point here. If I put that grip point there and set a rotate action to that rotation grip point, then this block would be able to spin around that point. So kind of goofy. Again, you kind of have to think about these as if they're like a button that you're putting in your block to be able to use, or for the user to be able to actually use. There's other things too, like alignment and flip. Alignment's pretty cool. You can align things with that. Obviously, like flip is kind of just like mirroring, just a different term for it. So when you use the flip parameter, anytime you put that in there, it allows you to mirror it wherever you put that flip parameter at. You still have to use a flip action, which is the same thing as a mirror essentially, but it's just a matter of placing the button, assigning the action, and then moving on from there. The other things here, visibility, we're going to talk about that today. Lookup, I'm going to be talking with that or talking to you guys about that probably tomorrow. I want to set aside a little bit of my time either this afternoon or this evening. I'm going to write down the steps on how to set up a lookup block because setting up a lookup table in a block can be pretty complicated. But as long as you have a decent set of instructions in front of you when you're doing it, it's really not that hard to do. It's just kind of wrapping your mind around how that works. So, but visibility, this one is used pretty much religiously in almost every block. Visibilities are what you see when you're in looking, let's look at a block here. Okay, so yeah, so look at this one here. You guys are probably familiar with this block. This is your adjustable shelf. And when you highlight this block, you are used to seeing this little triangle right here. This triangle is a list of visibilities. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This block has 5 visibilities attached to it. And all that is, a visibility is essentially like a layer. Like if you've ever used anything like like Photoshop or other programs like that, there are these, well, AutoCAD has layers too, and so do ogres too, but we'll get into that later. Anyways, so you have visibility states. Visibility states are just like a layer that you can turn on or off in AutoCAD, but it is like a separate set of items. Like it's a separate, and it's almost like a separate drawing that you're turning on or off. So that's what a visibility is. And so you can change things with a visibility. It's pretty fun. We'll talk about that one today. Actually, base point and point, I guess they're similar, but not exactly the same. So base point is kind of like what we've already set up, but a point is more just like a node. Anyways, so let's talk about some stuff we can do with this block. Now, this is a very arbitrary block. It's not meant to be anything more than that. We're not really making this for any reason that's going to benefit anybody down the road here. This is just for training purposes. So what I have here is I have a square. So to practice with this square, we can do a couple different things. One thing I would like to do is set up a visibility state. So I'm going to go into my parameters and I'm going to go down to visibility here. Now, when you click on that, it's going to ask you to specify a parameter location, which means where do you want to put this button at, essentially. So if I put that button over here, I'm going to set it at this quarter because why not? We'll put that button there. Should say, well, yours might look a little different, but you'll have this little triangle here. You highlight that triangle. You'll notice at the very top of your screen, you have this visibility toolbar that's up here. This is typically grayed out unless you have a visibility parameter on your block. As soon as you put one on there, this unlocks and you're able to actually use it for what you need. And right now it says my visibility state is 0, which is the name of this view here that we're looking at. If I click on this visibility states dialog box here, you can see that it'll bring up this little menu. And this allows you to set a list of visibility states. So we can label this one, maybe instead of visibility state 0, we'll label visibility state square. And you can name it whatever you want. Maybe I'll just name it square. Oops, square. There we go. To add new visibility states, you just click on this new button here. And it's going to ask you a couple questions. It's going to ask you, what do you want to name that view? So let's name this one circle. And then at the bottom here, there's options for this new state. usually what you're going to want to do is this top option, which is hide all existing objects in the new state. You could also leave visibility of existing objects in this state, which is fine. That is another option too. So if I hit hide all objects in the new state and hit OK, it's going to make a new layer essentially called circle. And we're going to hit OK. And now at the very top where this drop down is, you can see I got square and now I have circle. So I got two different visibilities that I can jump between. If I did want the square to show up on this circle layer, you can do that pretty easily. There's a couple things you can do. You can go up here right above that drop down, and there's 3 icons up here that you can see. This one is visibility mode, which if you click on this, you're going to see that anything in a different visibility layer or drop down is showing, but it's showed as a grayed outline. So it's there, but it's not on this layer. If you wanted to put it on this layer, all you're going to do is you're going to highlight that object and you're going to hit this little button with the make visible like full green square. You do that and then go back to square, go back to circle. Now the square is on the circle layer. Vice versa, if you wanted to remove that, let's say you accidentally put that on this layer instead, you just go up here and click on this blacked out make invisible icon here. Now I can click on this again. It'll hide anything that's not on this current layer. And so now we have a square. We also have a circle. So let's go ahead and draw the circle in too, I suppose. I didn't do that yet. So, well, come on. All right. So just use the circle command. That's kind of the other beauty of it too, is once you've drawn something, say you've put something in a block, doesn't mean that it's the end of the world. You can always edit that block after the fact. Like right now, I'm able to draw inside of this block, even though I'm in the block editor, not in my AutoCAD model space like we're used to seeing. And I take that circle. I'm also going to make this a, I'll go back to my home tab and put this on the geometry layer. That way it's all on the same layer. Go back to my block editor tab. And now if I go from square to circle, it switches from a square to a circle for my block. You can also go up here where it says test block, this little green checkbox on the left-hand side. And if you click on that, it is going to show you exactly what the user is going to see. So it's kind of like a preview of what the user will see when they go to use the block. So now I have the little arrow here that lets me switch between my 2 different visibilities of square and circle. All right, once I'm done, I can click the green checkbox to go back to my block editor here. All right. Some other things that we can do with this too. So let's talk about some of these other parameters here. We've kind of gone through the visibility a little bit. Just barely scratched the surface there, but it gives you a preview as to what you're able to do with that. Now, you can also use some of these other ones, like we'll talk about linear here in a second. Linear is a parameter you're able to use to create like a stretch function. You can use it for other things too, but let's say I wanted to add a stretch to this block to make this block sort of like how this block here has this grip point, and you're able to increase or decrease the width of it based on where you drop that grip point. All right, so if you wanted to make this square stretchable, you can do that by dropping in a linear parameter. And what I'm going to do is put one here. I just started by clicking on this point at the bottom. I'm going to click on this point at the top. And then you can just drag this somewhere off to the side. It doesn't have to be anywhere specific, just enough so it's not overlapping. Your view is probably for the best. By default, it comes in as distance 1. You can always rename that too if it bothers you. Like if you have a specific thing in mind, like if you're talking about cabinet height, you can come over here into your properties pane, and you can navigate over to where it says distance name, and you can call this cabinet height. Let's say if this was a cabinet block. So you can relabel it whatever you wish. I'm just going to call it height, because really this is just a height dimension or height stretch. Okay, so you'll also notice too, when you set this in here, in your properties, you're going to see number of grips. What that is you can see there's a triangle here and a triangle down here. Now, if you wanted to be able to stretch this in 2 directions, you can set it to have 2 grips. If you only wanted to stretch in 1 direction, then you're going to want to come back over here and tell it number of grips equals 1 instead of 2. The important thing to note about that too is that if you are only intending to stretch it in 1 direction, you want to be sure that when you set up that linear parameter, that your second click is the grip point that you want the user to be able to use. So like if I went like this and I wanted to stretch it widthwise and go from that side to that side, and then the second point that I'm dropping here is always going to be the default when I switch it to 1 grip point, like that. Might not make a lot of sense yet, but this one's X'd out. You can kind of see that down here. There's a little X there at the bottom of that grip point, meaning that the arrow is on this side. So the user is going to see that arrow when they go to mess with the block. So as of right now, even though that's on there, if I go to my block, it's not going to show up yet. And the reason is because we haven't assigned an action to it yet. So we still need to do that. So go back to my block editor, and I need to assign an action to that linear parameter here. So we're going to go over here under actions, and we haven't really talked much about these yet, but these actions here are exactly what it sounds like. It's the actual movement or the actual action of what the block is going to do. So depending on what you want it to be able to do, you may find that some of these are more useful than others. Usually when it comes to making blocks, you do see stretch quite a bit. Scale, we don't really use that much, but stretch is definitely something we use quite a bit. We also have things like rotate, which we kind of talked about a little bit. Flip, which is like your mirror command essentially. And you can do arrays within your block editor here too. And then we'll hold off on lookups for right now, but we will talk about that tomorrow, because that's going to be one of those things I want to make a formal list of instructions on how to do it before we actually get into that. So for the stretch action, we are going to assign that action to this parameter. So to do that, we just click on where it says stretch, and then it says select a parameter. We're going to select our arrow right here, our linear parameter on the left-hand side. And then it says specify parameter point to associate with action. Really important that we do follow these steps one at a time and don't skip any of these, because these are going to be essential to setting up that block. So when it says specify a parameter point, so what you're looking for is the grip point. So really that's the triangle there. So we're going to hit this corner where that triangle meets our block. Okay. And then it says specify first corner of stretch frame. Okay, so just like using the stretch command in AutoCAD, you guys have gotten a lot of practice with that, I'm sure. You're going to specify 2 points to make a stretch frame. So I usually tend to go towards the bottom right-hand side of what I'm trying to stretch. So I'll go over here, I'll click my mouse, and then I'll stretch a frame up to here. And in the top left corner outside of my object, I'll go ahead and click there as well. So again, just like using the stretch command, it's the same exact method of thinking. And then the last thing you want to do, it says select objects. Now, When it says select objects, it's important to remember that we are going to also be selecting them the same way we made this selection box here. So we're going to go bottom left to top right, just like that. And then once we've done that, we can hit enter. And it says specify action location. So this doesn't really matter. Really, you can put it wherever you'd like. I kind of like to put it next to where it is in the block, so that way I can just like have a better visual of what's going on. But if you click on this, it will highlight the object or the stretch frame that you're using for that. So in case we add more stretches to this block, what I'm going to do is label this as, instead of just stretch, I'm going to call it height stretch, like that. Okay. And now if I go to the test block up here, you're going to be able to see that now the user has the ability to actually see this stretch grip, or the linear parameter grip, which will allow them to then use a stretch action to stretch that block. So you could stretch it to whatever size you want it to be. Pretty nifty. Now, it does not show up on the circle here. Two reasons is I wouldn't really be able to stretch the circle anyway, but the other reason is if you did want it to show up on there for whatever reason, you'd have to go over to your circle visibility state or circle layer and toggle on the visibility mode, which shows you anything that's hiding. So currently, if I wanted to see that stretch, I could go here, highlight that, and hit that green box. And now if I go back to my test block here, not only can I see the stretch grip here, but I can also see it in my circle as well. But it won't do anything on the circle layer here. So like really, it doesn't really matter. However, I can still change things. Like if I type in 18 and go back to my square is going to be set to 18 inches. It's just kind of goofy to do that. So I'm going to go back and take that away. Oops, close test block editor. And we're going to hide that on the circle layer because it does not need to be there. Okay. So far we've set up one visibility parameter. That's this guy down here. We set up one linear parameter, which is this guy here. And we set a stretch action to that linear parameter. It will take some getting used to. So playing around with this a little bit in the block editor will definitely take some practice before you get real comfortable with it. Some other things that we can do just for fun to show like what you can really do with this block editor is we talked about the linear parameters already, but we didn't talk about some of the nitty-gritty stuff that you can do with them. So if I highlight my linear parameter, my height, I go over to my properties, you can see that there is something called a value set here. So this is key to setting up certain types of blocks. So like if you wanted your square to not be able to go over a certain height, you can set a maximum, you can set a minimum here. You can also set other items too, like increments and lists. So when you set up an increment, you're used to seeing that in where you've seen that before. It would be like in this block here with the drawer box. That is an increment stretch or increment on a linear parameter, meaning that it's set so that way you can only stretch this at increments of 2 inches. It also has a minimum and a maximum set to it too. So you could see the maximum is 28 inches, minimum is 10 inches there. If you actually go into this block and look at the, let's go to distance, that parameter there, and go over to properties, you can actually see the evidence of how that's set up. So it says value set, distance type is incremental, it's set to distance increments of 2 inches. Then you have a distance maximum of 28 and a distance minimum of 10. The reason those are set up there is because those slides are only available in certain sizes, and you can't really surpass 28 inches because they just don't make those slides longer than 28 inches. And you can't make them smaller than 10 because, again, they don't make them smaller than 10. So when the employee that made this block set this up, they did that intentionally. So that way there was no way the user could spec a slide that didn't work, wasn't actually in existence in the world. So they set up this intentionally that way so you can make sure that there's no mistake there. Our previous drawer box block did not have that. And so it was able to be stretched at whatever size you wanted. It didn't even have 2-inch increments. It could be stretched to like 18 1/4. And it didn't have a max or a min either. So it was kind of like really up to the user to make sure that they understood the limits of what slides were available to them. And we had a lot of issues with that because it's something that's really hard to remember as you're setting up a drawer, to remember all the different options they have for slides and the fact that you can only make it at a 2-inch increment. So we have it all set up now to where it's pretty much like the user doesn't really have to think much about it. It's already predefined, and it makes it so you can't accidentally spec something that doesn't exist in the real world. We could also set up things like increments for this parameter if we needed to. Again, that's under properties. So if you highlight the linear parameter, your height, you can go over here to your properties and you could say either you want it to be a list, an increment, doesn't have to have one, but you can set one up. The kind of cool thing about increments is they're really easy to set up. Lists are pretty cool too. If you go over to list, what it's going to do is it's going to have this distance value list here. So if you wanted to make it so you could only set the square to be certain heights, you can make that list of those heights here. So you go into properties where you set this to list, and then you go over to distance value list, and you're going to go over to this little arrow right here on the right hand side. Once you've opened that, this little value list will show up, and you can set this to be whatever you'd like it to be. So let's say I want this square to be available in 10 inches, maybe 18 inches, and maybe 22. I don't know. We'll just put those in there for fun. These aren't in any specific order. So I'm going from 10 to 12 and then 18 to 22. Really, I'm not really doing these at 2-inch increments, although I could be if I wanted to. But let's say maybe I went to 22 1/4 for some reason. So I could do that too. And when I hit OK, go back to test block, you're going to see that in here, now that I have that set, there's these little tick marks, and I'm only able to stretch it to those specific dimensions that we put in the list. So that's pretty nifty too. If you have something you have to limit. So if you have something like that, you can have the option to do that in the properties of the linear parameter there. You probably don't always need to have that in there, so I'll just put it back to none. But that is an option. Oh, I actually remembered it. That's kind of cool. Increments, we just looked at that, so I'm not going to mess with that too much, but you can also do the max and min. So if I wanted to go maximum of 16 inches tall, minimum of, let's say, 4 inches tall, I can do that too and go back to test block, and you can actually see the evidence of how that works. So I go ahead and stretch this, but oops, I can't go more than 16. And if I go down to here, it will not allow me to go less than 4, but I can go anywhere in between because I took away the increments and the list. It's whatever the user wants it to be, as long as it's within 4 inches tall to 16 inches tall. That is also kind of useful too, if you ever need it for anything there. Let's But again, let's just take that off because that really isn't something we usually have to use. I just wanted to show you guys that you can do that. All right.
Hey, Jacob.
Yeah.
Would it be okay if we took just a quick little break?
Like, yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Ooh, okay, no problem.
I'm gonna run to the restroom quick as well.
Yeah, probably a good idea. I probably should too. All right, I'll be right back.
Okay.
Whoops. Not mean to do that. Hmm. Oh, dang it. Whoops. Okay. Let's see, we got everybody? Nearly. Cody's MIA. Oh. Snap, crackle, and pop. The signs of old age creeping in every day.
Relatable.
Yeah. I twisted my leg a little bit and it was just like, sounded like I was snapping or stepping on a twig outside.
Me every time I stand up, Jacob. I'm made of Rice Krispies at this point. You'd think,
Oh,
listening to me
no.
move around.
Okay, we're not that old yet, but I'm getting there. You guys are all still very young, so
Jacob, I am not far behind you.
you guys probably aren't even 30 yet.
Narrowing in.
Yeah,
Narrowing in.
it's just a number. Well,
Till your
people
joints say otherwise.
well, my joints did that back when I was like 21. So, well, still waiting for Cody, but we can keep moving if you guys are ready. Or we could just kind of talk about some of the other things here. If you guys got questions or want to look at anything in the block editor thus far. Is everything kind of making sense as to like how this works? Because it's kind of different than what you would think about when you're dealing with AutoCAD. Tiny bit.
I would say it's like not super intuitive if I were to try to tackle this on my own, but I think you're doing a really good job at explaining what each thing does, and that definitely helps.
Okay.
I think once
Yeah,
I kind of break it apart and try parts of it out, that'll be when I figure out if I have questions or not.
sure. Yeah, it probably takes some practice. And like I said, like stuff like the linear parameter for the stretch, usually people struggle with that because they want to make sure, like the thing that I did mention it briefly, but really, really important and crucial to getting it down right is to make sure that you are following those steps that pop up at the bottom of your screen in your command prompt. Because the second you start to deviate from those, it's just not going to work. So much like any other AutoCAD command, it's like it's set up in a way that like you have to really know what it's asking for,
Yeah,
and you can't skip steps or it'll freak
yeah.
out. So but anyway, yeah, I'm glad that it's kind of making sense because it's a little bit of a different method of thinking than any other way of using AutoCAD.
Mhm.
Because you're almost going into the programming aspect of doing this here. It's not like ones and zeros or anything like that, but you're essentially making like a small computer program for a drawing, if you think about it that way, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Um, anyways, so yeah, we kind of went over some of the things. We've talked about visibilities, talked about for a parameter, for the parameter side of things, we've actually done a visibility parameter. We've done a linear parameter. I am going to show you like the flip and rotation and all that too, so we can kind of look at that as well. I'm just trying to think if there's anything. Oh, I'm trying to think anything else we can look at. within those 2 parameters that we started with so far, trying to go through the like each part of those parameters. So I guess I can do one more thing. So you guys have used the cabinet blocks. Like you've seen the like these guys here and how each drawer stays equal no matter how high or low the cabinet sits. That takes a little bit of finicky practice. Oh, I guess that one's not quite right anyway, but it takes a little bit of practice to get that down, because what you're using is multiple linear parameters and multiple stretches. I mean, I can open this up to show you what that looks like, and it'll probably look pretty scary, but really, like, what you're seeing is you have a stretch tied to each drawer. So like, because we want to make these all equal, we have to kind of do the math on it a little bit. Let me think about how to do this here in a way that makes sense to what we're building here in our block, because I want to talk about the setting. Let's see, where is it? The we haven't talked about this one yet. Oh, you know what? It's part of the stretch. It's not part of the linear parameter. So when you have a stretch function or a stretch action in a block, you can use what's called a distance multiplier. So a distance multiplier can be used in the, in a sense, like if you have like, let's do something goofy here just for fun. Maybe instead of a square, let's build a house here. So let's go, I'm just going to do this for fun. So we'll go house, hide all objects. Okay. And at this drawing, I'm just going to draw like a little kid sketch of a house because why not? So 0, 0 and 12 by 12. All right. I'm going to add like a little roof on it. I'm going to add little windows and a door. And so I can show you how to keep things centered as you stretch your house left or right or top, high or low. We'll do that. Let's see. 3 sides. Let's try this. Aha, we got Cody back. Nice.
Sorry, I'm back.
It's all good. I wanted to show you guys a little bit more about the different things you can do with a linear parameter. Oops, that was totally messed up. So one of the things that I just kind of started with showing these guys is that, oh, it won't let me use a line, that's right. Well, that stinks. That's okay. I didn't want to use it anyway. All right. For rudimentary principle, I'm drawing a house. House is really there as a representation of what you can do with linear parameters here. So let's say these are my windows. I know it seems goofy, but really this is actually something that's going to be usable. And we'll put a door in the middle. Come on. All right. And that's because, boom. All right. Here. We've got a house. Uh-oh, that doorknob's a little too big. All right, here we go. So we've got a house. Again, it's not really, I'm just trying to draw a house to draw a house. It's to show you guys how you can use the different linear parameters here to do different things. or the stretch parameter, stretch action. For all who is using the stretch action to do different things. So let's say I have this house. Okay, so if I want to be able to stretch the house in width, what I'm going to do is drop in a linear parameter. All right, linear parameter is going to give you the option to adjust the width of that house. Okay, so and again, before I even set the stretch action to it, what I would like to do is I would like to highlight that linear parameter here. And I'm going to go over to properties and tell it number of grips to be 1. All right, so now we just have 1 stretch grip, which is kind of hiding back here. Might be somewhat of an issue. I'm going to see about moving that down a little bit. That'll work. So the visibility is, I just moved it down so it's not overlapping the stretch here. Okay. All right. So then what I would like to do with this is I want to be able to stretch the width of my house, but I don't want to make it so that all of a sudden the windows are like way off or anything like that. I want to keep them like exactly where they're at. So to be able to do that, we're going to need to set stretch actions to this linear parameter. So the linear parameter again is essentially just the button that tells or lets the user click on it and activate the action. The stretch is the actual action. So we're going to select the parameter that we're assigning it to. So the linear parameter here. And then we need to specify the point to which this is tied to, which will be this grip here. Okay, and it says specify first corner of stretch frame. All right, so to be able to do this, we're going to do several different stretches here, but we just need to do one at a time. So I'm going to start here, bottom right-hand corner of my view. I'm going to move my mouse. So I'm highlighting just this little edge of the house. That's it, just that little part. This is really important because this is the first stretch, which will be, we'll hit enter. We selected the objects and we selected the, also selected the box that we're using to set up that stretch. So, all right, that should be okay, I think. We'll find out later. All right, so we've assigned one stretch to this linear parameter, but the tricky thing is you can actually set multiple stretches to the same linear parameter. So in a case like this, if I wanted to, let's just hide these windows for right now. So I can show you something real quick. We'll hide those in this view. Okay, so let's just say we have a door in a house, you know. So we got the peak of the roof, got the door there. All right, so if we were to set up a second stretch, the second stretch, well, this first one here is really going to be determining the width of the house, okay, which doesn't actually change anything with the door. So right now, if I go to my test block and I navigate to that visual state of the house, I have the house, I stretch it, I see that the door and the peak of the roof stay exactly where they're at, but the width of the house changes. Okay, so if I want to update this block to make it so the door and the peak stay centered, no matter how we stretch this, we need to go back to our block editor. And we're going to set a second stretch to the linear parameter here. So we're going to click stretch, select this linear parameter again, and we still want to use the same grip point. So we're clicking there. All right. And then it's going to ask you for a stretch frame and then to select the objects to which you are stretching. So we're going to go go here. Well, actually, hold on. Let me redo that. Come on. Stretch, linear parameter, grip point, and then my frame, which I'm actually going to go here, which is why I redid that. I'm going to start within there. I don't think it's going to mess anything up if I accidentally selected this distance 1 linear parameter, but I don't want to risk it either. I'm not a very big risk taker, so that's just not me. So we're gonna highlight those, highlight that rectangle for which we are using for our selection set, hit enter, and then we'll put this stretch down here in the middle. Okay, so we can actually start labeling these if it makes more sense. So like this stretch, let's call this house width, I guess. This stretch, we'll call this one, let's see, door, or maybe centered door. I don't know, something like that. All right. So as of right now, even though I have this here, I've selected the door, I've selected the house, whatever, the peak of the house there. If I go to my test block, what's going to happen is, if I navigate back to there, the door is going to slide at the same rate as the wall here. So that door is going to go, oh, actually, maybe it's not. It's really getting goofy. Hold on. Let me go back. I got to do something real quick. Sometimes it gets a little finicky if you have like a rectangle or like a shape, like a polyline inside of your block. So sometimes it helps if it's just individual lines like this. So I'm gonna kind of do some quick adjustments here. All right, I'm just redefining the selection set. So new selection set. And boom, let's try this and see if this does it. It might still do some goofy stuff, but let's give it a shot and see what happens now that I've turned everything into polylines instead of actual, or turned everything into single lines instead of polylines. It's a little bit closer to what we want it to do. You can see that there is still some goofy stuff happening here. Again, the door, if you pay attention to the motion of the door in regards to the motion of the wall, it's staying the same. So like this distance here is exactly the same. So in order for us to change that to keep the door and the peak of the roof centered, what we're going to do is we're going to go back, and because we have two stretches on the house, we need to select this stretch, which is the centered door stretch. We've labeled that as just a stretch action, but we'll go over to properties here. Okay, in properties, there's something called a distance multiplier. So what this is going to do is if it's set to 1, what happens is as the user stretches their cursor, or they move their cursor when they're stretching, 1 would mean that the objects in that stretch are going to move right alongside that cursor. They're not going to lag behind or anything. If you change your distance multiplier, so let's say you want to keep something centered on a stretch, you just want to change this to 0.5 or half of 1. And what that will do is now if I go back to my block, it will move anything that's in that stretch half the distance of where I'm dragging my mouse. So although I'm still having some goofiness happen there, which I'll fix, you can see that the door is staying centered on that house now. So again, that is a distance multiplier. That is something that is in the properties of the stretch action. So if you go back to here, I think I know exactly what I need to do with this. I just didn't want to do it, but all right, I'm gonna fix this. So you guys saw as I was stretching that this line and this line were moving out of whack, like they weren't following where they needed to be. The reason why they're doing that is because they are accidentally selected in this stretch and this stretch. So what's happening is those lines are moving 1.5 times the movement of my cursor. So like they're moving 1.5 times where I put wherever I drop the cursor at, because I have them set to travel at 1 speed, well, I guess you want to call it like distance of 1 to wherever the mouse moves. And this one would be distance of half of that. So technically it's moving it incorrectly. So what I would like to do is I want to take those 2 lines out of my selection set. Easiest way to do that is you could either delete the stretch and restart it, which, you know, that's fine and dandy. If you have to do it, you have to do it. You can also right click on your stretch here. And if you go to action selection set, you can go to modify selection set, or you can go to new selection set. And what you would essentially be doing is resetting what you've selected for your stretch. So just like the stretch command, it's just like redoing the rectangle that you've set to select the objects. So we'll click on new. I could also do modify, it doesn't really matter, but I'll go new. And I'll restart here. So I'm going to go bottom left to, or sorry, bottom right to top left. Just like that. I'm going to select my objects just like we would normally do. So bottom right, top left. And before I say I'm done selecting objects, what I'm going to do is hold down my shift key. And I'm going to click on these 2 lines because I do not want those to move with this center stretch. So I'll take those right out of there. All right, once you're done, hit enter, go and test the block again and see if that fixed it. This is a part of why you're seeing those lines happen sometimes when you're using like the cabinet blocks too, is because of accidental selections when you're doing your stretch. But now you can see like that door staying perfectly centered. So boom. You can build a tiny house. You can build a really big house, build whatever house you want. So we've done that. And we could take it a step further and we can go into the, I did hide these. I'm going to bring them back. I threw in a couple basic looking windows just for purposes of like showing off how to do this. So those windows are there. Okay. And so just like what we did with the distance multiplier on the door, we had it set to half the distance of wherever we dragged this. We kind of need to do some math here, and we're going to do, let's say like 1, 2, 3, 4. So here I got 1, 2, sorry, I'm pointing with my finger, you're not able to see it. So I've got 1, 2, 3, and technically 4 objects that I'm stretching all with the same stretch. So if I want to do the same thing that we just talked about with the door, as in keeping the door centered as I stretch this linear parameter, I can do the same thing with the windows too. It just takes a little bit of finagling. And again, this is kind of more advanced stuff too. So if it's kind of like confusing or kind of difficult, that's okay. This isn't something you would normally have to do, but it's just something that you can do. And I wanted to show you how it works. So that way, if you do end up making a block like this or something like a drawer stack, it kind of shows you the process of how to set that up. So, all right, anyways, we're going to set up 2 more stretch actions on this same linear parameter. So we'll go stretch. We're going to select the distance 1 parameter and the grip point for the stretch that we're doing. And then it's going to ask you again for the stretch frame and then to select the objects that you are stretching. So what I would like to do is start down here, bottom right, go up here to top left. And again, I don't have to go all the way through the roof because I don't need to select anything up here right now. I can just stop right about here and that's fine. We'll do the same thing. We'll select the objects here like this. And then just like before, we got to remember to delete this from our selection set, the base of the house. We do not want to include that because it's not going to, it's going to end up goofing things up. So I just hold down Shift, click on that line to remove it from what I'm selecting here. Once I'm done, I'll just hit enter. And then it gives me another stretch parameter, so, or stretch action on the same parameter. So we'll drop it there. And we can call this window, let's say window 1. All right, so window 1. These don't show up too, by the way, when you're using the block. They're just here for you to use when you're setting up the programming of the block. So you may, like it may look a little cluttered. I try to keep it as organized as I can, but sometimes even so, it's kind of hard to do. So anyways, so this stretch here for window 1, because we have, like we said, 1, 2, 3, we have 4 objects that we're stretching, and we want this to stay centered between the door and the wall. We're going to go to where it says window 1. So this stretch action here, and we're going to go back into properties again for distance multiplier. And because we're dealing with 4 objects, we want to keep this centered between object 2 and 4. If you think about it like as if I'm reading a ruler, I have 4, oh gosh, what you want to call it, like 4 quarters in an inch, okay? So this window here is like 3/4 of that inch. So it's 3/4 of that distance. So instead of putting 0.5 here, we're going to put 0.75. We're going to hit enter. All right. And now if we go back to the test block, we'll switch it back again to house. Okay. And now that we go to stretch this, you can actually see that that window over there is staying centered between the door and the exterior wall of the house. This one is not doing anything because it has not been set up to do anything yet. So the programming doesn't exist yet, but we'll get to that. Anyways, so to keep that window centered between the door and the wall, we did a distance multiplier of 0.75 because we are technically dividing this into like 4 separate objects. So window 1, door, or sorry, window 2, door, window 1, and wall. All right. Now, one last one, not to be super crazy about this, but we're going to set one more stretch action to this parameter, and that's to keep this window centered. So we're going to go select the linear parameter we're tying it to, select the grip point that it's being used to manipulate in the blocks. We're going to click there. And then you're going to, again, just like the regular stretch command, we'll start in the bottom right, go up to the top left. And then again, same thing here, bottom right to top left. And then anything we do not want to stretch or remove with that action, we're going to hold down Shift and remove it from that selection set. Once we've done that, hit enter here, gives us another stretch, which you guys may not have these little lightning bolts on yours. There's a command to turn those on, and I'll have to find that for you guys. If you don't have them, it's not the end of the world, but it does make it a little harder to see where all the actions are. So it's kind of one thing that I'd like to have turned on, but it's a very old school block editor command. Let me just find it real quick while we're talking about it. Oh. Aha, here it is right here. Okay. So if you would like to show those lightning bolts, here's what you're going to do. The command is called B action bar mode. So B action bar mode, all one word. And by default, it's going to be set to 0. If you want to see those little lightning bolts when you're setting up complicated blocks like this, it's easier for the person setting it up to be able to tell what they're doing if they have them turned on. So you would type in B action bar mode, and once you hit enter, it's going to say the value is currently 0. Do you want to change it? And if you change it to 1, these lightning bolts will show up, which are your actions that are off to the side of where you're setting up your parameters in your block. So throwing a lot at you guys right now. But B action bar mode, if I turn it off, see what happens just for fun. Let's see, B action bar mode. There we go. I set it to, oh, mine is set to 0. What the heck? Oh, okay, I see. It's set to 0 by default. I get you. So if you set it to 1, no, that wasn't right. I guess 0 turns them on and 1 turns them off, which is kind of backwards. Anyways, so if you want to see those, that's how you would do that. You would type in B action bar mode, and 0 will be the default to turn them on, and 1 will be the default number to turn these off. Again, these are just the actions that are tied to these parameters, and the parameters are just the buttons that the user is using to change the block or edit the block. So this last action, we've already set it up. We've selected the window, we've selected the linear parameter, and we've deselected the floor of the house. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into properties over here. And again, just like what we talked about earlier, we're talking about dividing this into 4 increments. So just like you were reading a ruler, if you have an inch, you're dividing it into quarters. So we have 4 quarters that we're stretching, so we need to change these multipliers to what makes sense there. So it's kind of hard to explain, but this one will be 0.25 because we only want to stretch this a quarter of what the overall is stretching, which is kind of goofy. But once we've set that and we go to test the block again, we should see that all the windows and doors stay centered along the walls of the house. So just like that. Kind of fun, kind of fun. So that is a distance multiplier. It is just a setting that is in your stretch action, and you don't have to use it, but you can use it to do things like this if you wanted to. I would also like to go into some of these other parameters here as well. So we've talked about the linear parameter so far, or we've done a linear parameter so far. We've done a visibility parameter as well. Fun fact is the visibility parameter is the only parameter that does not need an action tied to it. And the reason is because that is what the user uses to actually get to this list here. So as long as they have a visibility parameter, it will automatically give them the list that you have up here for your different visibility state. All right. Now, some other things that we can do. Let's say you wanted your house to be mirrorable, so that way your door could be flipped, from left-handed to right-handed or vice versa. So if you wanted to do that, you would add in a flip parameter. You're going to drop that in. I usually just put it right on the center point of whatever it is that I'm flipping. So I'll put it there. And it's going to be kind of like the mirror command, where it's going to ask you for a center line of what you're flipping. So we're going to go right here to here. That's my flip line. All right. And then right by default, it's called flip state. But really, if you think about it, that's essentially just the mirror command. Now, one thing that is kind of goofy, and we might have to modify this slightly, is that in the block, if I stretch the house and then I go to mirror it, oh, I didn't set an action to it. Hold on. Whoops, my bad. I got a step ahead of myself there. All right. So I put in the flip state, which again, that's just the button. It doesn't have any action assigned to it until you tell AutoCAD that you want it to have an action. So we set in the flip state or flip parameter. We need to set a flip action to that parameter so that way it knows what to do. We're going to select the arrow here. And whoops, I didn't read my instructions. So we're going to hit the parameter first. So this guy, then it's going to ask us to select objects. So I'm just selecting my door. There we go. And now I got this flip. Whoops, get on out of there. Okay, so this will be my door flipper. Door flipper 2.0. All right, so we have that. Now if I go back to the test block, I wanted to show you guys something here. So as I go into editing this block, right now, this works perfectly fine. Like I can flip the handle from left to right and right to left, no big deal. All right, but if I stretch my house, say I go to 20 inches here, now my flip state actually stays in the exact same spot, which is kind of a problem because now if I flip it, my door is going to be outside my house, or well, pretty close to it. It doesn't, it flips it right over that same line, no matter where that line is. So I've moved my door as I stretched my house, but now my flip state is not centered on the door. So that presents that issue. So to fix that, I think one thing we can try to do is we can redo the selection set for the center stretch. So go over here. We're going to go right click on that stretch. And we're going to go to new selection set. All right. And we got to remember, just like before, we're going to go from bottom right to top left. But I do need to make sure that I'm also selecting the pitch of the roof as well. And we're going to do that all the way through here. Same thing. We're going to select all of that. Now, before we finish saying we're done selecting objects, we need to hold down Shift and delete the floor and the flat line of the roof because that is not something we want to be able to stretch. All right. Once we've done that, we'll go ahead and hit Enter. And then we're going to test it again and see if the flip parameter actually does stretch with the new stretch that we just set up. So right now, perfectly fine, door centered. If I move this out to, let's say 20 inches, okay, cool. So the flip stays centered now. How about that? I can make my house whatever size I want and my door is still flippable. All right. So you kind of just have to play around with it a little bit. If you want to be able to do something, there's a lot of ways to do it, but you gotta have to work within the limitations of what you have in your block editor here. So again, that one's a really simple one to set up. The flip state doesn't really have a lot of actions to it. So like here, you can rename what it says. Like if you wanted to say instead of, maybe I'll just say right hand door and left hand door. Like you can rename these here. But really, I don't know that it actually tells the user that when you go to open that block and mess with it. Oh, it does. Yeah, so if you go over to properties and you're looking at your block as the user, you can say, I want my door to be right-handed or it could be left-handed. And those are just naming the flips. So naming the default one is right, the left, or the flipped one is left. I just kind of did that as a test to see what would happen. So you can do that type of stuff too. But the flip states are very easy to set up. There's really not a lot of steps to take to set those up. Really, it's just like the mirror command. You just have to have a center line and you have to have a button to tell, or for the user to be able to tell AutoCAD it wants that to be flipped or not. So that's a flip parameter mixed with a flip action. We can also mess around with the rotate too. Although I don't know why you would want to rotate this house, we can do that as well, just for fun. So let's go ahead and set one of those up. So we're going to throw a rotational grip in here. I'm going to set it. Why don't we set it at the top? I don't really know why you would do this, but I'm going to put it up here. And it's asking for the radius. It's also asking for the angle of this rotation. So if I want the user to be able to spin this house 360 degrees, like all the way around full circle, I can just type in 360, hit enter. And I think, oh, I messed that up. Hold on a minute. I must have skipped a step. Let's go back here. So let's see, rotation, specify base point, go with the roof, specify radius of parameter. Huh. You can tell I don't really use this one very often. Interesting. Anyways, so now that I have that grip point there, I put it right at the top of my house. I'm going to go over to actions here. I'm going to assign a rotate action to these the rotation parameter. So we're going to select the parameter, select the object. So in this case, I'm actually selecting everything because I don't want these stretches to get screwed up as the house rotates. I want that to all be locked in. So I'm going to highlight everything that's in here, hit enter. And then I have this action here, my rotate action. So we're going to go here and I can probably do the same thing I've done before, like a linear parameter. You can set a list of degrees that you want this to be rotatable. You can set a increment list. So if you want it to be like every 2 degrees, you can rotate this thing. You can do that too. You can set a angle maximum and angle minimum as well. So if you only wanted the user to be able to spin this like 180, you can tell it that they can't go any further than 180. So there's a few different things you can mess with there too. Anyways, so now that we have that, let's go ahead and see about testing this to see what we come up with. If it breaks anything. Back to our house. All right, so well, you know what I have to do probably is use that. I probably got to lock in the center with the center of that stretch to make that grip point stay in the middle. But I can rotate my house any direction I want to rotate it and go like up here. Oh man, that's a little weird. Okay, that was unexpected, but I guess it goes to show that not everything is not everything is going to work just right. Oh, you know what? Hold on a minute. I wonder if I could do something here. I talked a little bit about how I don't typically use the polar parameter, but I want to try something here. Maybe what I'll do is save this as block practice. Then I'm going to do something real quick. I'll save this block real quick. I want to check something out. Actually, first, before I do that, let me fix this too. So the the grip point for the rotate, I want it to be centered on the pitch of that roof, just like the door is centered with the pitch of the roof too. So I need to include that as part of my centered door stretch action. So I need to, again, right click on that, go to action selection set, click new. And I'm going to do this one more time. I'm going to highlight everything there, including the rotation grip here as well. All right. Let's give that a shot. Let's see if it worked. It said there was a problem. I'm probably asking it to do way too many things now at this point, but we'll see. Okay. Oh yeah, I definitely screwed something up there. I'm not really sure what, but that's okay. I'm gonna try something here to see if I can get this to work. What I'm gonna do is save where I'm at right now, I'm going to swap out that linear parameter for, let's see, block practice, version 2. All right, let's give this a shot. Here we go. I'm going to delete this linear parameter, which will also delete any of the associated stretches with that parameter. Okay. Oh, no, it didn't. Well, they're not associated with anything now, so I can't really have that either. So I'm going to have to redo those regardless. What I would like to do is try out this polar parameter and see if that actually allows me to be able to use the rotate function and the stretch function without it getting goofed up like what we were seeing earlier. So let me go back and I'll set these up again real quick. So we're going to go stretch. Oh, hold on. One sec. I need to switch this to one grip. All right, and I'm going to go to stretch. Select that parameter. Oops, stretch. Select that parameter. Select that grip point, and then first point of stretch grip. All right, sorry guys. I'm just testing this for my own curiosity more than anything else. Because I want to know if this actually works. Okay, I don't want that selected. I don't want that selected. All right, and then like before, this is going to have a distance multiplier of 0.75 or 3/4 of an inch there. I'm going to do another stretch action to this parameter, same grip point, centered though. Oh, gosh darn it. See, this is why I am being a, what do they call it? I'm contradicting myself because I'm not actually following my own advice. You want to make sure that you are following the steps carefully. I'm just trying to do it really quickly, like speed run it. And so there we go. I need to take a step back and actually pay attention to what it's doing. So that way I'm not messing it up for you guys. Okay. Okay, that'll be the center one. So again, the stretch needs to be set at a distance multiplier of 1/2 or 0.5. And then we'll do one more. Linear, or not linear parameter, a polar parameter, and see what happens here. Oh, you know what? Oops, hold on, I think I grabbed the wrong stretch. I grabbed a polar stretch. I need to be doing it this way, I think. We'll find out. This will be very interesting stuff. Maybe I need to be using the polar stretch. All right, let's give it a shot and see what we got. I also want to make sure I didn't select the floor by accident on any of those two. All right, 0.25. Looks like I did there. So modify, selection set. Highlight all of that. Remove, please. Dang it. Okay, I got to redo this altogether. I'm just essentially just doing the setting up that stretch one more time. So sorry, I'm kind of skipping over this a little bit. I'm trying to figure out if this is actually going to make a difference or not. As we rotate it, if it's going to still break the block or if it's going to allow me to rotate it and still stretch it without having issues. Okay. Yeah, same thing there. I forgot to undo the floor. So new selection set. There we go. There we go. Unhide that. We do not want that as part of that set. Here, and just verify that is 0.75. This one is 0.5. And this one is 0.25. Okay, let's try it. I want to see what happens. We'll see if it does anything different. Okay. Well, I obviously messed something up with the roof line. Well, that's actually pretty cool. Okay, well, I didn't realize you could do that, but hey, I'm learning stuff new here too. So now if oh man. Well, okay, I think it would actually work, but I think I forgot to include that as part of my rotation. Dang it. Dang it, dang it, dang it. Oh, whatever. Whatever, AutoCAD. All right. Oh, okay. I guess it won't let me do that. That's okay. It was worth a shot. Ooh, all right. We're still able to do a bunch of cool stuff, but I think more or less probably what I would need to do is actually get into the constraints, which I have not really messed a lot with since I was in school. And I don't really want to get into those today, but constraints are essentially like you're constraining the part to stay within a certain point. Like you can fix a part to stay within a certain point. You can lock in like center points. Good example of that would be if you were looking at a block for the let's see, we go back here to concentric blocks. We have one which we had an engineer work on at one point that actually turned out pretty neat. I wanted to kind of show you guys what that looks like here too. So that is under the vanity section. And if you go up to, maybe it's not in this set. Dang it. I forgot it's an older block, but it still is pretty cool. What it allows you to do is they had used what's called a concentric constraint. And that constraint is set to, you've probably seen this one too, but as you rotate this block, you can see that what's happening is you're getting some complex movements here. How this is able to work within AutoCAD is you see like these circles that are here, right? Within the different colored parts of this block. Those circles, the center points are locked in with a constraint called a concentric constraint. Okay, and when that's applied to a circle like this, it locks it. So if you have a circle on this part and a circle on this part, they are not able to separate, which allows for the user to be able to maneuver that block without it breaking or falling apart. Now, if I click on these parts, you can actually see those constraints show up. So you can see right there, it says concentric, concentric there. If I highlighted all of them, you'd see them all pop up. But what he's got here, he's got the base of the hardware locked. He's got a fixed constraint on that block. And then he's got a fixed constraint over here as well. But then he's got concentric constraints applied to every circle where like a pin would be to lock in the movement of this block. So again, we won't really get into that necessarily today, but that is something that you can also do too. And if you've worked in SolidWorks or Inventor at any point in time, you've probably seen these constraints or at least similar ones to these. They act pretty much the same. They're just within the block editor versus like in those programs. So anyways, some other cool stuff though too. Let's see.
Hey, Jacob.
Yes.
I think you went over this in the meeting, but didn't you say there
Mhm.
was something at 3 o'clock for you?
Yeah, I do have a meeting at 3 with Levi. Thank you for the reminder on that. Here's what we'll do then. we will just call it for right now. But I am going to show you guys how to do lookup and reverse lookup tables in blocks. My plan is to write down the instructions on how to set that up and get it all documented very well. So that way it's not like I'm just kind of like throwing it all at you, like kind of like what we did today. I'd rather actually have that process documented, not only for myself, but for all the other engineers too, in case they ever want to make a block that uses the lookup and reverse lookup table functions. Because it's kind of hard to set up without having some kind of instruction set in front of you. So tomorrow, I think that's what we'll do is we will work on that together as a group. Show you guys how to set up blocks like, back to our blocks file here. Well, the cabinets all utilize that, like these here. These are using reverse lookup tables to be able to turn these on and off. Because as you noticed in your block editor, these resemble what looks like a visibility state. But the trick is when you're in the block editor, you're only allowed to have one tab for visibility states. So we'll talk about this more tomorrow, but really what's happening here is you're tricking AutoCAD into allowing you to have multiple visibility states. So like these are all different. Technically they look like that, but they're really not. They're lookups. And then what you end up with is like a mile-long list of visibility states. But I'll go over that with you guys tomorrow. Don't be too overwhelmed by that because it looks like a mess, but really it's a lot more organized than what it seems like. But we'll talk about that some more tomorrow. We'll talk about lookups and reverse lookups there. If you guys are open and you don't have anything on your list, whether you're done with the stair training or you're done with whatever you have on your list, go ahead and try to work in this block editor a little bit. You can try to recreate the house if you want. I didn't really set these to any specific dimensions really, so don't worry about that. The house itself was a 12 by 12 square, so I just kind of started with the same square that we had here, and I just built the house over it so you can kind of see like how you would set that up. But if you want to go ahead and mess with that, you can. This recording is going to be saved into this folder or in the chat, and so you'll have that there. If you do have questions or anything, let me know. I will run through it with you and we'll talk more about it. Sure, there probably will be some as you're kind of all new to this block editor a little bit. So, but then again, like I said, tomorrow, one of my objectives is going to be to talk with you guys about the lookups and reverse lookups in the block editor too, so you can learn how to do multiple drop downs in a block instead of just being limited to just one. But I know that's kind of a lot too, but really, like I said, we have those books, like Cody over in Loves Park has those AutoCAD books. I have some here. There's also a lot of different tutorials online for block editing, but really if you break it down, what you kind of want to remember is that your parameters are your buttons. Your actions are they are the actions. They're like what the block does, but you have to assign them to a parameter to be able to make them work. And then I wouldn't worry about the parameter sets or the constraints today. Let's not focus on those. They are there. We will talk more about them, but you can play around with these for a little bit here today and just see what you come up with. Maybe try to recreate the house just as a practice one. If you don't get to the end of it, that's fine too. It's more or less just a practice here. So, yeah, I do got to get rolling. So you guys have any questions or anything so far?
Not yet.
Okay.
No, I'm all right.
Sweet. Yeah, I know it's
Don't
a
worry, I
lot.
will have questions.
Oh, I know. There's a lot to it. We're barely scratching the surface here, but if you guys do have anything, just let me know and we'll walk through it together. I'll try to help get it figured out for you. So you close
Cool,
this
sounds
out.
good.
Yep, no problem. Save this here. All right. Do you guys want me to save that CAD file at all in the chat too? Would that help
Sure,
you
that'd
guys
be
at all?
great.
Okay. All right. Can do.
Awesome. Thanks, Jacob.
Yep. All right. Thank you guys. I'll talk to you
Appreciate
more
it.
later.
Bye.
Bye.